Welcome to Paradigms at paradigms.life, the radio show and podcast that brings you inspiring people with visions of a viable future for life on Earth that includes humans. Hi, I'm Baruch, host of Paradigms. Happy to be here with you. Thanks for listening. Really glad to share with you this wonderful guest. He's a composer, arranger, vocalist, saxophonist in the jazz genre. He's also an educator. He's got some great projects and a brand new record called Losing My Mind, which just really caught my eye. Seemed perfect for this moment. And as always, you know, music is alchemy. Music transforms us when we hear it. So let's meet this person and be transformed by this music on this episode of Paradigms. Darmon Meader, welcome to Paradigms.
Great to see you, Baruch. And actually, I'm seeing you. Those of you who are listening don't know we're doing the Zoom game that we've all been doing for so long these last couple of years. Yeah,
yes.
Thanks.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here. I listened to your new record today, Losing My Mind. Firstly, I just love the title.
Yeah, it felt sort of appropriate after the last few years. And I recorded it during the pandemic, so it just kind of made sense. Yeah.
It's a wonderful collection of mostly familiar stuff that you've given a new treatment to. And, you know, right now we need things that lift us up. We really do. And this music does exactly that. It's really wonderful.
Thank you.
But I'd like to know, okay, I mean, firstly, let's just say you're both a singer and a sax player. That's a little unusual, but obviously wind. But how did you discover that you were a musician? How did this all happen?
Well, I mean, if we go way back, when I was a kid, I was the one that sat at the piano, just kind of hammering on notes before I knew where middle C was, just fascinated by sound. I grew up in a household that was artistically nourishing. My parents are both in the arts, and my father is a painter, and my mother is a potter. They make beautiful pottery. They were both sort of amateur musicians. A lot of classical music in the house. And then I listened to pop music like anybody, you know, as a kid, and decided I was going to go into music. I was a band kid, and I also sang in choir. You know, it's funny, you don't see this as much these days, or it's a lot of times when kids go through school, if they're in a really strong music program in public school, they have to decide early on, like, are you going to be a choral geek or a band geek? You know, and I was in this little school in Maine back in the 70s, and they're like, yeah, you're musically inclined, do all of it. And so I didn't have to choose. And when I went off to college, I sang in the choir, I sang in the band, I played in the band, saxophone, some clarinet. I actually played bassoon as well. I went off to college to be a classical saxophone major. That's otherwise known as an oxymoron. And also playing bassoon, was into classical music. But then I got to college and I just sort of discovered jazz, and had not had that experience much as a child. But as soon as I started listening to jazz, and I happened to be a saxophone player, so I'd already chosen the right instrument to dive into that. Just the freedom of the music, the energy, the spontaneity built into it. And I had continued to sing in college. I was a tenor, and so tenors are highly coveted. You know, if you're a tenor and you have a pulse, they want you to be in the choir. And so I kept singing and just loved that experience. When I headed out to Ithaca College, they had a vocal jazz ensemble there. This is back in the early 80s, and now those are more common in the collegiate world and also even in high school, but this was not as common. And as soon as I heard that group, I just fell in love with what that seemed like in terms of singing the harmony that we as instrumental jazz musicians have been playing, and the sonorities and the intricacies of that. Groups such as Manhattan Transfer were very popular at that time, and were kind of setting the stage for that. And then historically, it led me to listening to groups earlier than that, such as Lambert, Hendrickson, Ross, the High-Lows, Singers Unlimited, things like that. I just fell in love with that whole world. Meanwhile, I was still playing around working on my solo vocal stuff, just kind of for fun. But it always was just for fun. I always thought I would be a saxophonist primarily. Towards the end of college, I got a chance. Well, actually, after graduating from college, the vocal jazz director there, his name was David Riley, he was invited to take a group over to Europe to perform at some of those big festivals like North Sea and Montreux, and they have these sort of college outreach things. And he was invited to bring a group over, and he decided to put together a group of some of his favorite students that had recently graduated, kind of an alumni project. And I was a part of that, as well as Kim Nazarian and Peter Eldridge, which, if you know my group New York Voices, they are my longtime partners in that group, which is now celebrating its 35th anniversary this year. And we had such a great time doing this project that we decided to put together a professional group. So the professional version of New York Voices started in the late 80s. I was the musical director and still am the musical director of that. I'm the tenor vocalist. I play tenor sax, kind of the band leader. And that has been going on and on for all these years. And so it was this hybrid. It just sort of led to this culmination of me getting to do kind of the three things that I love to do equally, which is play saxophone, sing, and arrange. And actually, we'll add a fourth one, be part of a community, which is, this collective and the energy that comes from that. If you followed the history of New York Voices, though, you'll see that we have all at times stepped out on our own and done various projects, whether it's Peter Eldridge and Lauren Kinnan both have done a lot of their own original music, projects that are completely original music. Kim Nazarian and I have tended to lean more on sort of the jazz standard world with a little bits of our original music thrown in. But with New York Voices being sort of our kind of first priority. The pandemic rolled around, and all of a sudden I had a lot of free time on my hands, as most of us did. And so I finally got this sort of back burner project of doing another solo project on its feet. And that's sort of how we got to where we are in having this conversation.
That's the first part of my conversation with Darmon Meader. We'll be back with more, hear more about the music, the inspiration. But we're going to start out by listening to a song called It Could Happen to You, from Darmon Meader's new record, Losing My Mind. This is Paradigms at paradigms.life.
Hide your heart from sight, lock your dreams at night. It could happen to you. Don't count stars or you might stumble. Someone drops a sigh and down you'll tumble. Keep an eye on spring, run when church bells ring. It could happen to you. All I did was wonder how your arms would be, and it happened to me. I tried to keep my lonely heart from sight, locking my dreams in the deep of the night. No time for sonnets of love, not for me. I got things to do and plenty places to be. Counting stars is for dreamers and dreamers alone. No need to be so starry-eyed and vaguely discontented. You'll be stumbling and rumbling and fumbling and tumbling down, down and out. Keep an eye on spring. You better watch out when those church bells ring loud and clear. That's the story I told till your lovin' took hold. My heartstrings are ready for some tugging and teasing. Arms open wide for this magical season. I bet you never thought a mystery like ours could come to be. It could happen to you like it happened to me. when church bells ring, it could happen to you. All I did was wonder how your arms would be, and it happened, and it happened, and it happened to me. Vo, 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 it happened to me.
It Could Happen to You, from Darmon Meader's new record, Losing My Mind. It's a great song, great arrangement. Now here's some more of my conversation with Darmon Meader. I just love hearing about people who are inspired at a young age and fall in love with their creative something and go with it. You know,
Yeah.
Permission is sort of a thing. You grew up in a family where the arts were obviously respected and celebrated. So there was a lot of permission implied around you. But you know how it is, and you're also a teacher. You know that people have to give themselves permission to fully let it out.
Mm-hmm.
How did you do that?
Well, you touched on the first part, which was the environment where I grew up. It's interesting. I grew up in Maine in a kind of a small community, and the arts community there was smaller. It's just a rural area, but we were around a college environment. I think I mentioned to you before we started that my father taught at Colby College up there, and so I would be taken to concerts as a 7-year-old, hearing a string quartet, or and then going to see the symphony or whatever. And so that energy was introduced to me very early on. And of course, because my parents were in the arts, I never had to have that conversation that some people have, like, well, what are you going to do for a real job, that kind of thing or whatever. They were very supportive. And so I never really questioned, a lot of it's naivete. You just wander into it. Thank God, right? If we looked at it through the lens of a 50-year-old or something, we'd never try the things that we do when we're 18 or 22, right?
It's true. Reckless youth.
Yeah, that's part of it. I feel very lucky that the circumstances as they unfolded, different opportunities, like when I first left college, I sang in a house band at a resort up in New England for 3 summers, where it's so interesting, instead of like all the Charlie Parker and Sonny Rollins and Herbie Hancock tunes or whatever that I was working on in college, now all of a sudden I had to, I was in the real world, and I was playing in a house band where I had to be able to sing Don't Get Around Much Anymore and Fly Me to the Moon, and just the stuff that would be played for the masses, and I learned a million tunes, and I learned what it was like to stand in front of a band and have a little bit of banter with the audience and all that kind of stuff, and just kind of learn how to perform and not just execute music, so all these kind of things just unfolded, and then the fact that I met these people in college that became my partners in music for so many years. I mean, that was just a very lucky situation. So Peter Eldridge and Kim Nazarian and these other people early on that are important parts of my life to this day. So all those things, I think, just helped kind of keep the ball rolling and let it unfold in a way that slowly became a career. We always say, as we're freelance musicians, like, how's your career going? Well, I go, well, it's still going, ask me again in another year,
I had dinner last night.
yeah, I still have a roof over my head, but we don't take that lightly. We appreciate that the arts community and the jazz community has continued to be there for us and for me individually. You also mentioned a key thing for myself and also my partners that I work with is the education side. We've all jumped into the world of teaching music and sharing our experiences. I think that is important because it helps continue to generate interest in the music and keeps your audience going. But it also, you learn as a teacher in the process, you learn a lot about, it's interesting. The things you tell your students, you sometimes have to kind of go, okay, if I'm going to talk to them about this, I need to do this as well. It just gives you another perspective on the music when you're thinking about it from that teaching perspective.
It's clear that this is a calling. This is not a job. This is not an ego trip. This is something much deeper than that in terms of your presence here in the world, which is true for many artists. And it's thank goodness, because we need that. But I'm really interested in, okay, so my day job, I'm a psychotherapist. So I'm working with people in a healing context. Obviously, it must matter to me to do that. Mm-hmm. I'm really interested in what it is you're giving out on the meta level, if you will, beyond the music, because it's obviously beyond the music.
Yeah. Well, as an aside, my wife is a psychotherapist as well. So,
so you know how strange we can be.
So, well, you mentioned a calling. Yeah. When I'm talking to students who are really wanting to do this, that's one of the things I oftentimes will do, especially when they're getting into the deep studies at a university level and they really want to immerse themselves. It's like, do you really want to do this? I hope you're not just doing this because you think it would be fun or, it'd be a cool thing to stand on stage or whatever. No, you better really believe in this because it's a lot of work and it's not just fun and games. You want to really invest in it. And it's a journey.
Talking about the music with Darmon Meader. And now we're going to hear the title track from his new record, Losing My Mind.
Sun comes up, I think about you, the coffee cup, I think about you, I want you so, it's like I'm losing my mind. The morning ends, I think about you, I talk to friends, I think about you, and do they know, it's like I'm losing my mind. Every little chore, the thought of you stays bright. Sometimes I stand in the middle of the floor, not going left, not going right. I dim the lights and think about you, spend sleepless nights to think about you. You said you loved me, or were you just being kind? Or am I losing my spend sleepless nights to think about you. You said you loved me, or were you just being kind? Or am I losing my
Losing My Mind. Isn't that a great song? Great rendition. Darmon Meader from his new record. And that was the title track. Here's some more of my conversation with Darmon Meader. And that segues perfectly into talking about the songs you chose, because many of them are songs we know well, but from what you just said and just from listening to it, I think you didn't choose them because we know them. You choose them because you wanted to do something with them, and you did.
Yeah, the arranger part of me really does dictate a lot of how repertoire falls into my book over time. And sometimes it's a certain song I've just gravitated to it because of the beautiful harmony and or the beautiful lyrics or melody, and it just seemed like a tune that I would love to embrace, such as the beautiful Yvonne Lean's melody, L'Embre Gemime. It's just such a powerful song. I mean, you can't go wrong choosing an Yvonne Lean's tune anyway. They're all just so beautiful. Or Losing My Mind, the title track, that's the Stephen Sondheim song from Follies. I had just always loved that tune, and I'd also noticed that there had been some other vocalists recently. I think Cyril Mee was one. I think she had a whole album, if I'm remembering, of Sondheim stuff. And other people have taken some of his music and brought it into the jazz arena, and I just loved the way they did it. And so I just kind of thought that would be fun. There are times when sometimes a song, it's almost the opposite, where I've taken a song. Well, for example, I Hear Music, when I chose that one, I've given an assignment to some of my students at times to take a song that you might not necessarily have on your A list for whatever reason. You just never thought, okay, I don't know, that song doesn't really resonate for me. See what you can do to arrange it in a way that you're like, okay, now I feel like it stands out in a different way, because either it's a song that's been heard too many times, or whatever, maybe it wasn't harmonically as interesting as you thought you'd like it to be, or whatever. So you'll take it, and it's almost like an arranger's game, and see what you can do to shift it around and change it up a little bit, so that even if somebody goes, oh, geez, that song, when they listen to it, they kind of go, all right, that was a fun ride with that one. So there's a lot of different reasons why tunes come to be in the book, but they are oftentimes driven by some interest from an arrangement standpoint. Because especially when you're doing jazz standards, I feel like if you just do it the way everybody's heard it, that just feels like, okay, that was a recording of a jam session. Like, or, well, if I really want to hear, I think I'd rather go back and hear Ella Fitzgerald's version, frankly. So you want to do something to give it a little bit of a unique stamp.
Well, that makes a lot of sense.
It's a tricky thing, though, because as jazz vocalists, having lived on both sides of this fence as an instrumentalist and a vocalist, the instrumental world has tended to, for decades, really embrace the idea of original compositions, from Duke Ellington and Charlie Parker through Herbie Hancock and Miles and Chick Corea, et cetera, right up to now. The idea of putting out a lot of original compositions as an instrumentalist is highly embraced. jazz vocal world has been a little slower to respond to that. I think there's more and more room for that. I mean, there really is now, but there does still tend to be a tendency for a lot of the fans of jazz vocals to want to hear the Great American Songbook or those standards that are like, a comfortable sweater that people like know and they trust, right? So I did include a couple of originals on this one, and something I would like to continue to do, but I do think that that's important, that as jazz vocalists, we venture out in that way as well. It's tricky. Do you want to write a song that feels like it's a kind of a nostalgia experience? It feels like, oh, that song sounds like it could have been written by Cole Porter, but it wasn't. Or do you want to try to expand into a different sound? A lot of the jazz vocal world right now is crossing into sort of a grayer area that might be sort of jazz meets singer-songwriter meets a little bit of pop influence or R&B.
It's really a wonderful thing when you have this creative calling. Doesn't always make life easy, but it's really great to be in the creative groove. Darmon Meader is certainly living there. Here's another track from his new record, Losing My Mind. This is I Hear Music.
Not that I'm a Punchinello, just an optimistic fellow with a lot of very mellow music in my soul. Not that I'm a Pollyanna, shouting out aloud, Hosanna. It's my singing heart I can't control. Of a morning breeze up there, the rattle of the milkman on the stairs. Sure, that's music, mighty fine music. The singing of a sparrow in the sky, the barking of the coffee right nearby. That's my favorite melody. You, my angel, phoning me. I hear music, mighty fine music. And anytime I think my world is wrong, I get me out of bed and sing this song. Say ba 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 boo day oh way to ba 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 the murmur of a breeze at break of day, the rattle of the milkman on his way. I hear music, nothing but beautiful music. The singing of a sparrow high above, coffee in the morning made with love. Like my favorite symphony, you're my angel holding me. Sure, that's music, fascinating music. And anytime I think my world is wrong, I get me out of bed and sing. I sing. I got to sing this song. I hear music.
So great hearing these new renditions of familiar songs. That's I Hear Music. Darmon Meader from his new record, Losing My Mind. And now here's the next part of my conversation with Darmon. You're listening to Paradigms at paradigms.life. Had a woman on the show recently named M.A. Allen, who's a jazz singer, and who had just released an album of almost all originals, which is extremely brave, with a couple of standards. And I love what you're saying about this, that this is opening up more in terms of original material for vocalists, because, well, music reflects the times. Music reflects what's going on. And obviously, pandemic, the politics of the times, all of that right now being expressed in the music is important. So the standards are obviously of great value and beauty and meaningful, but having things that address what we're experiencing right now, I think it's needed. It's not just a great idea. If we're going to make some progress as humanity, we've got to move forward in all our endeavors.
One of the things that I find to be very challenging is writing lyrics for original songs. I personally, I feel like I can write a melody and come up with an interesting chord progression relatively quickly, something like oh, that feels like a nice little song. The lyric side is, I have the utmost respect for people that can just write lyrics in a very proficiently. Finding that sweet spot where the lyrics feel like they have some poetic sensibility and they aren't so simple that they're kind of pedantic, and they aren't too preachy. If you are trying, like you mentioned, like you want to try to say something with the song besides like, oh, this is just another love song. You want to have some sort of statement in there, but you don't want to be so preachy that the audience feels like they're being, reprimanded or something.
Yeah. Not didactic.
Right. Sometimes lyrics can feel so artistically flowing and poetic and interesting that you're like, that's cool. I don't know what the lyrics mean, right? And sometimes that's kind of groovy and cool, and you're just like, well, that was it sort of washed over me. That was a cool experience. But too much of that, and you can kind of feel like, okay, either I'm feeling sort of stupid as the listener that I can't figure it out, or the lyricist is being a little, what's the word I'm looking for?
Indulgent.
Thank you. There's the word. Now I'll say that. Yeah, the lyricist is being a little too indulgent in thinking that they can take us that far off track, perhaps.
It's an interesting thing. What you just made me think of out of the blue is putting E.E. Cummings to music. Someone ought to put E.E. Cummings to music.
Well, and it's interesting. I've explored that a little bit with taking poetry, but this is the interesting thing. I mean, poetry covers there's so many different approaches. There's some things that have a very simple, rhyme scheme to it, and that you could find the flow of very easily in a 4 and 8 bar structure kind of music form. But a lot of the poetry that you find the most interesting actually is so free form that you kind of like, wow, I'm not sure now the music is likewise going to be more free form than I was maybe imagining. And what's also tricky is with poetry, you don't feel like there's a creative license to say, oh, I'm just going to cut and paste this or move it around so it works with my music. It's like, yeah, I don't think that would be a good idea. Unless the poet was a close friend and you're like, hey, dude, you mind if I move these around a little bit? Yeah.
Oh, I love it. So, with New York Voices, obviously, I mean, this is about playing out.
About performing live.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, well, and the truth of the matter. I mean, not to get all into the complexity of the recording business and music in general, but the days of any artist making a living off of selling their recordings, that's almost non-existent. I mean, unless you're a huge pop star, and even them compared to what was happening 20, 30 years ago, it's minimal compared to what it was. So it's all about getting up on stage and performing, which it brings up an interesting angle for this solo project, because I am not necessarily making live performance as the Darmon Meader Quartet a huge priority. I love doing it, but New York Voices is where my live performance focus tends to be. I try to find opportunities to perform live on my own as much as I can, but the voices always come first. But that is still a huge part of what New York Voices is about. We look at recording, whether it's me doing my own solo project or New York Voices doing an album these days, we call it a very expensive calling card.
Mm.
And the other side, because that sounds a little cynical, but the other part is it's just in our DNA to want to document what we do and to be able to have that to live on in perpetuity in some way or another. And so we just do it. And what's interesting, so many musicians, like the musicians that helped me on this project, almost everybody was doing it for, a very low fee. And basically we're all in it together. We love to, like, if somebody calls me up and says, hey, can you come and join me on a couple of tunes? I'm like, yeah, sure, of course. And and I'll be calling you at some point for the same favor, and we'll each throw in a couple of shekels for each other. But that's what we want to do as artists, is support each other in that way.
We'll be back with the final part of my conversation with Darmon Meader after we hear this song, which I'm sure you'll recognize from the new record, Losing My Mind. Lovely Day.
When I wake up in the morning, love, and the sunshine hurts my eyes, and something without warning, love, bears heavy on my mind. Then I look at you, and the world's alright with me, and the world's alright with me. Oh, just one look at you, and I know it's gonna be a lovely day. Lovely day. Lovely, lovely day. Lovely day. Lovely day. Lovely, lovely day. Lovely day. When the day that lies ahead of me, better days ahead, seems impossible to face. Seems impossible to face. And when someone else instead of me always knows the way, always seems to know the way, oh, then I look at you, and the world's alright with me, and the world's alright with me. Oh, just one look at you, and I know it's gonna be a lovely day. Lovely day. Lovely, lovely day. Lovely day. Lovely day. Lovely day. Lovely day. Lovely, lovely day. Lovely day. Lovely day. When the day that lies ahead of me seems impossible to face. When someone else instead of me always seems to know the way, oh, then I look at you, and the world's alright with me, and the world's alright with me. Oh, just one look at you, and I know it's gonna be a lovely day. 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 A lovely day. Lovely day. Lovely day. Lovely day. Lovely, 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 lovely day. Lovely day. Sunshine. Lovely day. 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 Lovely
Lovely Day. Recognize that? Remember that? Great song. Nice to hear it again. That's Darmon Meader from his new record, Losing My Mind. And now here's the final part of my conversation with Darmon Meader. It's a beautiful thing. I love hearing that. I get to hear that from lots of people. And I really think the music world, not the big pop music machine, but the world of people like you, is one of the places where humanity is actually thriving and growing and being reflective and learning. And it's not static. It's not stuck. And it's really, really great. And it's in every genre of music, that's really happening, which is awesome.
Yeah. Occasionally in a conversation, someone will ask, so is jazz, is jazz dying as an art form? And, I always answer that in two different ways. I might say, well, jazz as an industry, as a way to make a living, that's a challenge. And there's no denying that there are fewer clubs now than there were 20 years ago. The jazz community is a little bit more fractured in terms of what they support, and the audience is a little more spread out and harder to reach at times. But jazz as an art form, that's not going anywhere. I mean, that's because artists are artists and fans are fans, and the two will find each other in one way or another. At what scale? Who knows, right? But it'll always, I think, continue in some way or another.
Well, jazz, you've talked about the freedom, the free form of jazz. And on this show, listeners know that does not mean that everything's an improv by any means at all. Right. That it's actually a very studied form. But the freedom that jazz represents, as we see different types of ideological movements in societies, not just in the United States, but worldwide, the arts reflect and sometimes sometimes always are a response to the things that humanity is doing. So when you have a musical form that celebrates freedom of expression and thinking outside the box, perpendicular to authoritarianism, then the artistic expression becomes more than just about entertainment. It's necessary for other aspects of our thinking. It's not so blatant. It's not like maybe you do play my saxophone at a protest, but it's that playing music that lets people travel in their mind, gives them permission to experience different thoughts, different ideas, and to question the status quo. And that is critical.
Yep. There's a funny parallel. It's no coincidence that artists, musicians in general, jazz musicians specifically, the music sort of is parallel to our own sense of the way we want to live in the world. Like we tend to be less inclined to look for the super structured life that is going to be kind of, day 1 and day 300 are going to be virtually identical, which is good, because if you decide you're going to start just traveling around the world playing music, you better be ready for each day being a unique experience. Unique in a good way, and sometimes in that day was a drag. So luckily, you're just kind of flexible to kind of roll with that, because you're into the idea that the music moves around and shifts around, and that is parallel to what your day-to-day lifestyle is about. The other thing I was going to mention that's interesting, jazz has a funny sort of dichotomous thing that it breathes in a funny way, in that if you look, so jazz has been around now long enough that we look back at it historically, whereas if you were to look at people that are developing this sense of what jazz is in the 30s and 40s and 50s, there wasn't that much history even for them to kind of reflect back on and think, oh, let's do the nostalgia thing and go back and sound like, it was just a forward moving thing. It was a freight train moving forward. But now it has these two different worlds pulling in different directions. It still wants to move forward, but there's also this embrace of the past and wanting to sort of find the experience of what it would have, the nostalgia experience of trying to honor what Chet Baker sounded like, or to embrace the or if you look at, on the crooner side of things, even, somebody like Michael Bublé kind of being a reflection of the Frank Sinatra experience of the 1950s and 60s, or a real hardcore bebop alto sax player being, that must have been what it was like to go hear Charlie Parker at Birdland, in 1947, So it's interesting that they kind of it pulls in both directions, and it's kind of fun. I like that it does that, but you also do find you have these different camps of fans. They're like, oh man, that's already been done. No, just got to push. Everything has to push forward. And it's like, well, but there's also something wonderful about what it's like to kind of live in a groove that sounds like, oh man, I feel like I'm listening to Les McCann in 1972 or something. Like, wow, this is great.
And then you get these interesting people like Madeleine Peyroux, who comes along with this voice that is, a doppelganger for Billie Holiday, singing really contemporary stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Fascinating and lovely.
Yep. That's funny you mentioned her name. Andy Ezrin, who is the pianist on every track on my record, he is part of Madeleine's band these days. He's out touring with her quite a bit. So, yeah.
Oh, she's just wonderful.
Yeah.
This is great. Wow. I am thoroughly enjoying this conversation. And the music is really, well, what I do when I'm going to do an interview is I get up in the morning and I put on my headphones and I lay down and I listen to the record because I want it fresh in my mind. And so it's a great way to start the day. And this music, it didn't make me laugh. It didn't make me have a great big huge smile. It made me feel sort of a Mona Lisa smile. It's joyful. It's uplifting. It's not raucous. It gave me some oomph and some verve. So I just think this is what we need, and it's wonderful. And with the heart that you put into it, what this means to you, and what you're doing with music in the world, I just hope people listen to the record.
Well, I appreciate that. It was a labor of love for sure. And I'm so thankful to all the musicians, and a big thanks to Elliot Shiner, who mixed the entire project. Elliot, who, if those who may or may not be familiar with his name, he is a very famous engineer and worked with a lot of the Steely Dan projects that we know, and Eagles and all kinds of stuff back in the day, Manhattan Transfer a couple times. And he became a friend of New York Voices years ago and has engineered a number of projects of ours. And he's just at a point in his career where he just wants to support music he loves. And so he's jumped in with me. He also worked with Lauren Kinnan, with my partner in New York Voices, worked on one of her solo albums. And he's just a big supporter of all of us. And so we're very thankful. And he obviously knows what he's doing, that's for sure. So it's great working with him. I look at my music as a soloist as just sort of an extension of the various parts of my personality. Like, I have a classical sensibility, so I do find myself oftentimes drawn to sort of these classic tunes, and I love to arrange them and come up with ways to make them feel like they have their own structure. So, sometimes the tag, a musician's musician comes up, which sometimes is like, you don't know if that's a compliment or a curse, but I kind of feel like that's sort of where I kind of fit into that category. I just like getting into the minutia of what makes this music tick, and then hopefully perform it and record it in a way that is not just about the nuts and bolts of it, but is, shows some emotional energy and, a little bit of fire under all that.
Well, before we started talking, you referred to, the video in your messy studio, and then you referred to your Virgo self, which made total sense because that's the neatest looking studio I've seen.
Yeah. But if I were to turn the camera around, you wouldn't want to see what's on the other side.
It's great. Thank you so much for talking with me, Darmon. Really, really, it's wonderful. And
my pleasure, Baruch.
Good luck getting it out, and we'll be in touch with your next project.
Thank you. Appreciate it so much.
Darmon Meader, thank you so much for talking with me, for coming on the show, and for sharing your music. Really enjoy the music and the perspective of lightness and creativity that comes through. Musicians make music because they love it and kind of because they have to, and we get to benefit. But when you feel called to something that's bigger than yourself, it's pretty important not to ignore that call. And the arts really are that for so many. And there's lots of folks who feel creative impulses who never explore them. I encourage you to explore them. Why not? If you'd like to know more about Darmon Meader, check out his other albums. And he's got a book out called Vocal Improvisation, An Instrumental Approach. Check out his website, darmonmeader.com, DarmonMeader.com. Thank you, Darmon. I hope you'll also check out the Paradigms website, paradigms.life, where we've got 14 years worth of episodes for you to enjoy. You can also find Paradigms wherever you find your podcasts. Player FM, iHeart, Stitcher, all those places. Paradigms has a Patreon campaign going to help pay the bills. We could really use your support right about now. Patreon.com/paradigms. Thank you. Last week, the word for the week was listen. This week, the word for the week is kindness. This music that Darmon Meader has put out has kindness in it. He cares about the listener. He cares about the music. He's offering something to make us feel good. What if we employed that approach every day? What can we do to be kind, to love what we're doing, and to offer it up with the intention of making people feel good? There's so many heavy things that we think about and feel about, but there's got to be enjoyment of life too. So let's be kind to ourselves, to the people around us, and see if we can make life more enjoyable for everyone. All right, I'm going to leave you with one more song from Darmon Meader's new record, Losing My Mind. This is called The Song Is You. Baruch signing off for this episode of Paradigms. We'll be back with more inspiring people. Until then, be kind and be well.
I hear it every day, all night. Your love is like a song. I hear music when I look at you, a beautiful theme of every dream I ever knew. Down deep in my heart, I hear it play. I feel it start, then melt away. I hear music when I touch your hand, a beautiful melody from some enchanted land. Down deep in my heart, I hear it say, is this the day? Oh, I alone have heard this lovely strain. I alone have heard this glad refrain. Must it be forever inside of me? Why can't I let it go? Why can't I let you know? Why can't I let you know the song my heart would sing? A beautiful rhapsody of love and youth and spring. The music is sweet, the words are true, the song is you. mighty fine music, the beautiful theme of every dream I ever knew. Down deep in my heart, I hear the part, I hear it play. Just one look at you, I hear it start, then melt away. Oh, I hear music when I touch your hand. A beautiful melody from some enchanted land. A simple sonnet or a symphony strain. I heard it before, don't remember the name. Down deep in my heart I hear it say, is this the day? Oh, I alone have heard this lovely strain. I alone have heard this glad refrain. Must it be forever inside of me? Why can't I let it go? Why can't I let you know? Why can't I let you know the song my heart would sing? A beautiful rhapsody of love and youth and spring. The music is sweet, the words are true, the song is you. So forever, the song is you. The song is you. The song is you.
You've been listening to Paradigms at paradigms.life.